Good morning, students. So today this is our first class in this online session. So here we will be starting with a poetry by Oliver Goldsmith, and the name of the poem is The Village Schoolmaster. So before going further, we will start I'm going to read the poem once, and after that we will go for the explanation. So here it goes. Beside yon straggling fence that skirts the way, with blossomed firs unprofitably gay, there in his noisy mansion, skilled to rule, the village master taught his little school. A man severe he was, and stern to view, I knew him well, and every truant knew. Well had the boarding tremblers learned to trace the day disaster in his morning face. Full well they loved with counterfeited glee at all his jokes, for many a jokes had he. Full well the busy whisper circling around conveyed the dismal tidings when he frowned. Yet he was kind, or if he severe in aught, the love he bore to learning was in fault. Here in this line you see that this just now which I read about, the love he bore to learning was in fault. Here it's the spelling F-A-U-L-T, fault, but when we are reading this poem we should pronounce it as fought, to rhyme with the last word of the previous line, ought. So to rhyme with ought, here we should utter the word fault as fought. Okay, the second line here, the next one. The village all declared how much he knew. 'Twas certain he could write and cipher too. Lands he could measure, terms and tides presage, and even the story ran that he could gauge. In arguing too, the parson owned his skills, for even though vanquished, he could argue still. While words of learned length and thundering sound amazed the gazing rustic reins around, and still the gaze and still the wonder grew, that one small head could carry all he knew. So students, this poem, Oliver Goldsmith, when he was in his childhood, maybe around in the age group of 6 to 7, he was taught by this schoolmaster in a village school. So later, in the later part of his life, when he remembers about his schooling in that particular age group, he remembers, he recalls the teacher, the village school master. In this poem, he mentioned about what kind of person he was and how the school was. So here in this poem, you see some of the words. Here it's very important. Some of the words, it's quite, for us, it's complex to understand. In the first stanza, see, like the word blossomed first. So what does it mean, blossomed first? With blossom first unprofitably gay, the second line of the poem. So here, blossom first means the beautiful yellow flowers. Again, boarding tremblers, that means anxious. Next comes ought. Ought means anything. Here again I told you this last word of the following line, fault. Here it's given in the poem fault, but to pronounce, we'll have to pronounce it as fought, just to rhyme with the previous word ought of the previous line. Now cipher, it means to calculate or to do maths. Again comes terms and tides presage. Here he could predict where boundaries should be and the dates of religious festivals with tides. Gauge, that is calculate more complex things like liquid contents of a container or the area of a piece of land in such ways. Again, owned, it comes as admitted. Words of learned length, that was one of the quality of the teacher. So it means long words, probably from Latin or any kind of languages, which was very much alien for the students at that particular time. Now rustics. Now who are the rustics? Rustics are the working class of the village, or you can say working class country people. That means the village people. So here the poem, when we read this poem, it comes to our mind that why Oliver Goldsmith, he mentioned about the teacher, or what kind of person he was, or where was he, what kind of school was that. It was a village school, so what it could be, what was the surroundings. So here, to know about all these things, basically we need to know the history of the poem. So Oliver Goldsmith, he was an Irish poet. So basically he spent his childhood, his life most often in village areas. So here it is believed by many of the literature historians that Oliver Goldsmith, in his poem, this is an excerpt from the poem The Deserted Village, which is a long poem by Oliver Goldsmith. Here in this extract of that poem, The Deserted Village, we got this part, the village schoolmaster. So here in this poem, the poet, that means Oliver Goldsmith, he referred about his teacher, Mr. Thomas Byrne, who was also one ex-soldier. So being an ex-soldier, it's very sure that he is full of discipline in his works and orders. So the poem is an excerpt from a longer poem by Goldsmith called The Deserted Village, and conveys the speaker's sentiment about a teacher. The word village in the title of the poem, The Village Schoolmaster, it clearly suggests that the poem is set in a rural area, probably where the speaker lived and was taught by the subject of the poem. In the first two lines, the speaker mentions exactly where the school was located, because in the first line we get there about the particular area, about the surroundings, about the locality of the school, that building where it was located. The fence beside which the school building was situated is described as straggling, which means that it was in a very awful condition, or in a dilapidated condition. It was totally kind of in a damaged way. The road leading towards and past the school was lined with flowers which were unprofitably gay. So it means that the flowers were blooming beautifully, no doubt, but there were no one to admire or to appreciate the beauty of the flowers. In the next lines, the speaker refers to the school building itself, a noisy mansion, like a machine running with the activity of teaching and learning. Dear students, you can see in our school also, the moment we entered the classrooms soon after the assembly, after the finishing of the roll call, all this kind of works, what happens, we usually gets a buzzing, murmuring sound. Sometimes we got to hear some sounds from the other classrooms, shoutings of teachers, or trying to explain, or sometimes cheering up the students, or sometimes we can hear also the sounds of cheering up from the students. So this is kind of a mechanism that runs, it starts when a school is in a running condition. It comes to us, we often come to know about that. So the noisy mansion means the process of the activity of teaching and learning that was going on in that building. So the village teacher, equipped to manage a class, taught his lesson there. The term master denotes the respect he enjoyed as he was a teacher. The speaker goes on to describe the teacher's character and style of teaching in the poem. The teacher was very strict and had a stern look about him. The speaker states that he knew him well, which means that he had an in-depth understanding of his teacher and could probably read into his expression and gestures. The familiarity could also have been the result of the many personal and individual encounters he had with his teacher. The word truant implies that the speaker may have been one of those who deliberately missed the classes and who had been confronted by the teacher about his misconduct. Further aspects about the teacher's personality indicate that he had an expressive face, and his pupil could easily read his mood as a result. They would, for example, know that a certain disciplinary action is coming towards them, especially for those who had been disobedient. It's very common, like even in our school, even in our classes, even in, if I believe, like each and every school, there is a provision to take action for any kind of misconduct done by the student. So it was the village schoolmaster here in this poem, the plot, the same, the condition, it was with the relation in between the students and the village schoolmaster was similar, like as of today. So it was not an unknown or kind of uncommon thing. It is quite natural. So they would be trembling in fear of what was to come, of those who were committing any kind of, or who were doing any kind of misconduct. It is clear that the teacher also had a good sense of humor, because in the later part of the poem we see the teacher often cracked some jokes inside the classroom, and for that some of them, they smiled, they laughed. No doubt some of them may not understand, but because of the stern gesture, because of that strict discipline the village school teacher, the schoolmaster was having, for that some of them, they just smiled, they just laugh at him, at his jokes, so that to make the teacher believe that whatever jokes he cracked, they understood it very well. Because in the line in the poem you see, full well they laughed with counterfeited glee at all his jokes, for many a jokes had he. So they may not understand, but they believe that the teacher was having, he was kind of a humorous kind of person, and he was having humor, sense of humor. For that only he can crack jokes. Full well the busy whisper circling around conveyed the dismal tidings when he frowned, yet he was kind, or if severe in aught, the love he bore to learning was in forth. So there may be some kind of disturbances, there may be some kind of strict actions taken by that school teacher, but still then he was doing all this because he was a firm belief, he was very much into the process of teaching and learning. He was very much eager, he was very much interested in that process of teaching and learning. So the next few lines, it goes in this way: the village all declared how much he knew, it was certain he could write and cipher too. Now the village people, the commoners, the village people, they believe that the schoolmaster, he knows a lot, he have deep knowledge in each and everything. It was certain that he could write and he could calculate, he could measure, he could do anything. He was quite a very literate person. So he can lands he could measure, terms and tides presage, and even the story ran that he could gauge. In arguing too, the person owned his skill. And sometimes what happens, if there is any kind of argument or debates going on, even though he loses his points, even though he go far behind his points, still then he keeps on continuing with his arguments. while words of learned length and thundering sound amaze the gazing rustic range around. So it was whenever he speaks in front of the common people of the village, it believes like it seems like the people, they were awestruck with the words, with the thundering sounds that comes, the words that was pronounced by the teacher, by that village schoolmaster, the words that has been used by him. It was quite, all those words looks very much sophisticated for the village people. They were totally amazed with all these things, and still they gaze, they look at, they admire. Gaze here, gazed, it means the admiration of the village people towards the village schoolmaster. They believe like it was kind of, they took him already a very knowledge person. They believe him a very intelligent and literate person. That one, and they also, in the last line you will see, and they gazed, and still their wonder grew, that one small head could carry all he knew. So the common village people, they were very much shocked. They were very much surprised to know, like, that small head of that village schoolmaster, how is it possible for him to keep the vast knowledge that he tried to convey to his students as well as to the village people? So the common rustics, that means rustics here, that means the common village country people, the village people, they were awestruck, they were surprised, they were very much anxious to know, how is it possible that in that small head, the village schoolmaster kept that broad knowledge. It was always remained a question, a matter of curiosity for the village people to know that how the single person can acquire this vast knowledge. So this is all about the poem, The Village Schoolmaster. So here, in this poem about the village schoolmaster by Oliver Goldsmith, in this poem we will come across various kind of literary terms, literary aspects that which we are going to get in this poem, such as the rhyming schemes, the use of words. When you will read the poem, you will come to know that some rhyme schemes and the use of commas, use of notations are very much different from that of other or present or nowadays poetries. It is very often that to know about all this, to understand this, we must have a bit knowledge about literature history. So as we are going to discuss it for you people, so literature history is part, even though we need it, but we will discuss it later on in later classes. But for now, regarding this poem, in this part, whatever we got, actually this poem is an extract of a long poem by Oliver Goldsmith. I told you earlier that it is an extract from that long poem, The Deserted Village. Basically, this poem tries to tell us one of the fact of Oliver Goldsmith's personal life, how he spent his school, how in that school, how the teacher was, what kind of teacher he was, what kind of qualities that teacher possesses. So in this poem, he tried to keep all those here. So to understand this poem, I gave you the explanation. If you want, you can hear it again and again, but never forget to read this poem continuously, at least for 5 times, and after that try to listen to my explanation which I have given you. By that only you will able to get it, the poem, the essence of the poem very clearly. So for now, thanking you all, we are going to wind up here, and in previous classes I will